The problems we had faced upon returning to Ayodhya had not disappeared, but slowly they had become manageable. Ram's policy of ruling firmly and justly but kindly too had improved the morale of all who brought their troubles to court. Our people were additionally struck by the fact that Ram freely used the treasure we had brought with us to improve the rundown state of the kingdom. He sent the welcome back tributes of neighboring kings directly to the treasury with instructions that they be used to better the roads that connected Ayodhya to the other major cities around us. He made sure these roads were well patrolled. This, as he had foreseen, improved trade and made Ayodhya a favorite stop for merchants. Ram reduced taxes, especially for the districts that had suffered worst in the famine, and gave free grain to farmers to start over. He ordered that organizations be founded all over the country to house, feed, and teach work skills to the destitute. As a result, poverty and petty crime fell to an all time low. He made sure the city was vigilantly patrolled by guards day and night. Men and women could now go about their business safely no matter what the hour. Tales of the vibrant life of the new Ayodhya, its music and dance concerts, where world famous artists performed, and its colorful bazaars with shops that never closed enticed many visitors to our country. I too had been busy. With the help of Shrava and the staff he had hired, I made sure that the palace was efficiently and smoothly run, and that wherever we turned, we were faced by beauty and prosperity. The gardens were, of course, my special joy. I had taken care to choose plants and trees that would bloom or produce fruit at different seasons of the year so that visitors would be greeted at all time by a riot of colors and sweet smells and singing birds. But at the same time, I made sure to improve matters outside the palace walls. I took a special interest in the lives of destitute women in Ayodhya and established safe houses for them. I opened the palace to female petitioners and made it known that the needy, as long as they were prepared to work hard, would receive money to start their own businesses. Nowadays, when I accompanied Ram to the public balcony of the palace to greet our citizens, the applause was deafening. This didn't surprise me, but I was taken aback to hear people cheering me as well because my work was done mostly behind the scenes. Lakshmi, they called me, food giver, queen of flowers, remover of sorrows. There were stories that the palace storehouses were brimful because grains flowed from my palms. Our gardens and lakes were as beautiful as in Indra's realm because flowers sprang up in my footsteps. Wherever I traveled in the city, people felt illness and grief receding, and peace filled their hearts. I had a feeling that Shrava was responsible for some of these exaggerated tales, but I didn't mind. It was rather gratifying to know I was so popular. Ram's old teacher, says Vashishta, visiting us from his hermitage, was delighted to see the new Ayodhya. You have turned out to be an even better ruler than I had hoped for, Ram, he said. No doubt, it is because you have such a wonderful helpmate. It was good that you put the needs of your people before your personal celebration. But now it is time for your coronation. When the news was announced, jubilation swept across the country. Hordes of people from distant corners of the kingdom began to make their way to Ayodhya to see their rightful king finally anointed. All of Kaushal's allies accepted our invitation enthusiastically. Even Ram's sister Shanta, whom we had not seen in years, sent word that she was going to be present for her brother's special day. Ram was particularly pleased about this. I have the fondest memories of my big sister playing with me, he said. I only saw her here a few times because, as I told you, my father let his dear friend adopt her. And after she got married and grew busy with her wifely duties, she rarely visited us. I am so glad she is coming to bless us on this occasion. She is making a special effort. She lives very far away and I know doesn't like to travel. I was excited about Shanta's coming. I hadn't been able to spend much time with her when she had come to Ayodhya after our wedding. I had just arrived from Mithila and was tired and homesick and disoriented by my many new duties. I looked forward to making friends with her this time. I hoped she would approve of the changes I had made around the palace. For me, this was an especially happy time because I discovered that I was pregnant. My happiness was doubled. When I shyly announced my news to Ram, he was overjoyed. He gave me a beautiful pearl necklace as a gift of gratitude. We told only to Kaushalya, Urmila, Lakshman, and the chief physician of the palace about my pregnancy. Queens in Ayodhya did not make many public appearances, and when I was visited by the wives of courtiers or neighboring queens, I dressed myself carefully, arranging my sari in a loose and flowing fashion. Ram and I decided that we would announce the pregnancy at the coronation. It would give the people another reason to celebrate and another event to look forward to. My days now were busier than ever, for I had taken on the task of decorating the palace as well as the grounds where the ceremony would take place. I had also offered to take care of our guests, some of whom had already started to arrive. It was a big job, but I wanted to do it. So many times in the forest, people had welcomed us even when they lived in a hut and had only a handful rice to share. I wanted to do my part now, Fortunately, Urmila, Mandavi, and Shrutakirti helped me with my tasks. Working together, laughing and joking as we used to in Mithila, I felt we were as close to our happy childhood as we would ever get. In my rare moments of leisure, I would retreat to my balcony. I had accepted Kaikeyi's peace offering of the Mythian plants she had collected, and they bloomed happily all around me. I would put up my feet and sing to the baby in my womb. I sang of my joyous childhood in Mithila and of my dear parents. I sang of the glories of Ram and my hopes for my child and the great king I knew he would become. I loved most to sing of my life in the forest and the many charming wild creatures there. Though I told no one, not even Ram, I missed the freedom of forest life and its many enchantments. But I never sang of the time I spent in captivity in the Ashura palace or of the ten headed king, magnificent and terrible, who had destroyed his beautiful kingdom because of his infatuation with me. The time was too painful. I could not bear to look at it. Perhaps I would never be able to do so. Shanta arrived the day before the coronation. The long journey had tired her out. The swaying of the palanquin, with the men running double fast to get her to Ayodhya on time, made her nauseous. A plump, cheerful woman who usually loved to talk and laugh, today she looked pale and wan. After the barest of greetings, she retreated into her mother's chambers, where Kaushalya made her drink lemon water and lie down in a darkened room. I will come by your rooms in the afternoon if I feel better, she whispered to me apologetically. I am so sorry. I had been looking forward to chatting. I assured her that it was not a problem. I was planning to take a nap myself. I wanted to be well rested for tomorrow. Come by if you feel up to it, I said, though she didn't look like she would be able to. I will leave the chamber doors unlocked, I said. Once I reached my room, I took off the heavy silk I had worn to greet the guests. It was beautiful but stiff with gold thread, and it made me sweaty and tired. My maid handed me a thin cotton saree which I draped around me with a sigh of relief. I dismissed her and lay down on the stone floor instead of the bed because it was cooler there. It was always hot nowadays, and often at night this made me restless. The door was pushed open. I sat up, yawning. Had Ram decided to take a break in the middle of his work? But to my surprise, it was Shanta. I couldn't sleep, she explained, and it was so gloomy and dark in my mother's chambers. I decided I would come and chat with you, hear all about your adventures. Stories about them have reached even my faraway home. I had been looking forward to my nap because the evening was going to be busy again. A group of ascetics with strict dietary restrictions had arrived, and I needed to make sure that the cooks prepared the right kinds of food for them. But Shanta was making an effort to be friendly. and after all, I had invited her to come to my room. So I smiled and asked her to sit on the floor near me and began to tell her about the beautiful forests we had traveled through with their mountains and rivers and volcanoes and the many amazing wild creatures I had seen. But Shanta, it seemed, wanted something more exciting. She asked me about the Rakshasas we had encountered and how Ram and Lakshman had destroyed them. When I said I didn't really know the details because I didn't like watching bloody battles, she seemed disappointed. Tell me about Ravan, then, she said. Did he really have 10 heads, like they say? Was he fearsome or good looking, or perhaps both? Tell me about how he stole you away and how he kept you in his palace for months and months. Was his palace beautiful beyond compare, like the palaces of the gods? And is it true that though he abducted you to avenge his sister Surpanakha, he then fell in love with you? Anger flared in me at all these questions. How could Shanta be so insensitive? Even Urmila hadn't asked me about these things. Didn't Shanta realize how painful these memories were? I wanted to ask her to leave my rooms, to leave me alone. But she was my husband's only sister. He was so happy that she was here. I held on to my temper and said, I never really looked at Ravan, so I can't say much except that to me he was a monster who destroyed my happiness. But even as I spoke, my voice trembled. I hadn't looked at him, but I had heard him. I had heard him declare his love for me over and over and that he had disgusted me. But I had also heard the stories he had told me about his harsh childhood and the years he spent in severe tapasya up in the Himalayas, praying for special powers so he could relieve his mother of her poverty. I had heard him sing songs that he had composed on the glories of Lord Shiva, his beloved deity, and at the moment of his death, when he had touched my foot, I had seen him in his true form as the celestial gatekeeper of Vishnu. Shanta must have heard the weakness in my voice because she pushed on. It is not healthy to keep it all inside you, pressed down upon your heart. If you don't feel like speaking about it, at least draw me a picture of Ravan. You can do it right here on this stone floor. Look, here is a piece of chalk. Draw it and then together we will stomp on his head for daring to steal you away. I promise you, you will feel a lot better after that. What persuasiveness in her voice made me take the chalk? What kind of spell did she cast on me? Did I really believe that drawing Ravan would help me exorcise him? As in a dream, I pressed the chalk against the floor. I can only draw his feet. I was forced to look at them plenty of times when he stood in front of me, threatening, I said. That is all right, Shanta said. I will draw the rest. When he looked surprised, she added, From my imagination, of course. The chalk glided over the stone. In a moment, I had finished drawing Ravan's feet. I tried to hand the chalk to Shanta, but somehow it stuck to my hand. Now it was moving rapidly by itself, pulling my hand along, drawing Ravan in his entirety. What is going on? I cried. Sister, help me. But Shanta's face was changing. The nose caved in. Instead of ears, there were gaping holes. And the eyes, I knew those burning, hate filled eyes. It was Shurpanaka. Somehow she must have come to Ayodhya and taken on Shanta's form. Oh, yes, it is me, she said. I followed you all the way from Lanka and waited patiently all this while for the right occasion. With all the hullabaloo of the coronation, it was easy enough to slip into the palace, taking on the appearance of one of the maids. And then, when Shanta arrived, my plan became clear and I took on her form. Tell me, Sita, did you think you would get away so easily? Did you think I had given up and forget about you after you had destroyed my home and everyone I loved? Did you think there were no consequences? That you could put the devastation of Lanka behind you, my people killed or maimed, their spirits broken, and live happily ever after in Ayodhya, loved by your husband, your family, your subjects, your sons? Oh, yes, I can feel those two alien hearts pulsing inside you. Maybe I will kill you and your unborn babies right now and leave you here for Ram to find on the eve of his coronation. She flexed her hands, from which nails as sharp as scimitars now jetted. I tried to move away, but her Asuric powers had me pinned down to the floor. I couldn't even curl myself into a ball to protect my stomach. Not my babies. I prayed with all my heart. Goddess, I don't care how much I have to suffer, but let no harm come to them. Then a dim corner of my mind registered what Surpanaka said and what I had repeated unthinkingly. Babies. I was carrying twins. With an effort, Shurpanaka brought her hands down to her side. No, I will not let you escape so easily. I have a better plan. Live on, Sita. Live without love as I have been forced to. See how it feels to lose everything you cherish. I will give you a little hint. You will long for death. She grinned fiercely at me through tears and then she was gone. The portrait of Ravan opened its eyes and looked at me. It too grinned. It was dreadfully lifelike, as though the Asura king might rise up any moment from the floor. I tried to wipe it from the floor with the edge of my sari, but I couldn't. Whatever magic Surpanaka had used had etched it indelibly into the stone. And now my sari was stuck to the image. I pulled at the garment, panting with effort, but it wouldn't come loose. Just then, the door to my chamber opened and I heard Ram's voice. I thought I would spend some time with you before. He broke off and stared at me. What are you doing, Sita? Why are you lying on the floor, panting? And what is the picture? His voice rose and I heard the anger and disgust in it. His face was cold and hard as granite. Is it? Were you drawing? What were you doing, Sita, and why? My face flushed with shame, although I was not guilty of anything. I was well aware, though, of how damning the entire scene appeared, just as Shurpanaka had intended. I haven't done anything. It is Shurpanaka's trickery, her evil magic, I cried. Even as I said the words, I could see on Ram's face how unbelievable they sounded. I forced myself to breathe deeply, drawing upon my inner strength even as my heart pounded in agitation at Ram's accusing tone. I am innocent, I said to myself. I am pure. I refuse to feel ashamed because I was made the victim of trickery. I refuse to apologize for something that is not my fault. I refuse to let Shurpanaka win. I sat up straight and told my husband what had occurred and who had been here. I prayed that he would believe me because truth was all I had. Ram frowned as he listened. My heart sank at the incredulity on his face, his angry, fisted hands. And after I had finished, he closed his eyes. I could tell a battle was raging inside him. It seemed to take forever. I held up my breath and felt it burning in my lungs. Finally, Ram opened his eyes. I trust you, Sita, life of my life, he said. I don't know how Shurpanaka could have entered this palace. It is heavily guarded and special protections have been laid on every entrance. But if you say so, then that is what must have happened. He dragged a heavy quilt from the chest and covered the portrait with it. I will get Vashishta to take a look and figure out how the evil brought in here may be exorcised. Meanwhile, let us move you to a guest chamber where you can rest. Relief made me burst into tears. I laid my head on his chest and hugged him tightly. As long as Ram is on my side, I thought I can face anything in the world at all. Only later, lying in the guest chamber, too shaken to sleep, did I think. I would have believed him at once if our positions were reversed. Why did it take him so long to believe me? The coronation ceremony went off perfectly, the kind of event bards would sing about for years. The largest grounds in Ayodhya had been prepared for the event, decorated with garlands hung from poles and covered with brightly colored tents. In the center of the grounds was the largest pavilion decorated with silks and jewels. Here, kings and sages sat on elaborately carved gold and silver chairs. Behind them were placed the visiting dignitaries and the noblemen of our court. The queens and noblewomen sat to the side of a pavilion behind a curved lattice wall that had been specially constructed so they could see without being seen the Ayodhyan way. The Rakshasas and monkeys each had their own sections, cordoned off carefully so that curious onlookers couldn't bother them. On another side were the great merchant families of the region. The rest of the field was filled to overflowing with cheering citizens, many of whom I could tell by their simple clothes had travelled from the distant countryside. I felt a powerful energy coming from the sky. The gods too were watching. Amidst music and chants and flowers being strewn under our feet, we moved to the dais constructed for us. We walked side by side, Ram and I. My husband had broken tradition and insisted that my place was beside him and not behind. I tried to step with appropriate dignity and stateliness. The gold and jewel I wore were very heavy, but the lightness in my heart bore me up. How long my husband had waited for this day, how much he deserved it. We were now seated on the dais, on thrones that seemed far too enormous. But Ram seemed perfectly comfortable in his, so I too made an effort to appear the same way. When Ram raised his arm to acknowledge the cheering crowds, I did the same, and the cheers grew even louder. Raja Ram, interspersed with Sita Ram. After so many years of deferment, it was finally happening. The ceremony that Dashrath had so eagerly planned but failed to execute. I could feel him looking down at us from the heavens, smiling. Were all the dead up there then, Ravan too? Or had he been transformed back to being a gatekeeper of Vaikuntha? Stop, I said to myself in annoyance. I never want to think about Ravan again. But of course, that only brought more uncomfortable thoughts of the image that had etched itself into the floor of my bedroom and wouldn't be erased, no matter how many maids, all sworn to secrecy, scrubbed it until a powerful medicine man performed a purification ceremony of Surpanaka, whom no one could find even though the palace was thoroughly searched. Of bewildered Shanta, the real one, lying next to Kaushalya, abruptly awakened by Ram, who had come to check on her. She had sat up, rubbing her eyes and mumbling that she had fallen into a deep sleep and had some very strange dreams of the additional protection charms that were placed the same day all over the doors and windows of the palace, but secretly, because Ram didn't want people to know what had happened and gossip about it. Of the guards now positioned 24 hours outside my chambers, which made me feel a little like a prisoner. I forced my mind back to the ceremony, to the beautiful, grand mantras being chanted for the prosperity of our kingdom, an abundance of rain and crops and cows and progeny. May they come soon. Vasishtha anointed Ram with waters from the 5 holy rivers and then took the large crown, which had been kept in the treasury since Dashrath's death, and placed it on Ram's head. May you be the best ruler Bharatvarsha has ever known, he said. Ram joined his hands in humble reverence. May that become true by your blessings. But I knew he needed no blessings, not for this. Whatever else in life he might have to strive or struggle for, he lived and breathed kingship naturally and effortlessly. He loved his people more than his own self. Once he was crowned, Ram stood up. The gathering grew quiet with anticipation, wondering what would be the first thing that their king would say to them. My people, Ram cried, I want to share some wonderful news with you. Soon there will be a little prince joining you. He looked at me and added, with a smile which acknowledged our private joke, our princess. To celebrate this happy event, I declare a holiday tomorrow to be spent in festivity. We will have music and dancing and fireworks at night, and a gold piece as a gift for every citizen of Ayodhya, and a silver piece for all inhabitants of Kaushal. The grounds erupted in cheers. I smiled and waved for as long as I could. The people wouldn't stop applauding. The musicians joined in with drums and trumpets, the noise cresting until I felt a headache coming on. I tried to catch Ram's eye to ask him if we might leave, but he was enjoying the moment, looking out at the assembly with so much love in his eyes that I didn't want to spoil it for him. So, what if I had to endure a little discomfort? I was happy to do it for Ram. Wasn't that what love was all about? Then I noticed Vasishtha standing next to my husband. He was running a hand over Ram's shoulders in blessing, the way a father might. I could feel how fond the sage was of his student, how he wanted the best of everything for him. I was glad he was there for Ram on this special day when King Dashrath could not be present. But even while there was a genuine smile of joy on the sage's face, I noticed a frown of concern on his forehead. What was it that worried Vasishtha at this auspicious moment? Thanks for listening.